Okay, everybody, does anyone remember this little game called Neopets? You could do stuff like play with your pet, feed your pet, grow your pet, play games. Okay, we all know what this is. It was that game. It had the animals we all love. We all used to play this game. Maybe what you don't know about Neopets is that it had a dark side. That's right. Remember those days when you were on the playground with Jake, playing Pokemon cards, and he has the unbeatable Charizard deck? Well, we all know what I'm talking about here. Johnny's playing with magic cards or whatever, okay, but the real kids were playing, what they were playing was the Neopets TCG, okay? Now this card game is hardcore. Forget turn-based combat and spells or using one attacker at a time to fight. Forget all that. In the Neopets TCG, you are essentially battling your opponent through 4 simultaneous dog shows. Okay, you are trying to have the best dog, and if you get the best dogs, you win. That is a real card game right there. Let's get into it. Okay, a little disclaimer. This card game is old. Like, I'm talking over 16 years old, and it's the kind of card game that it stopped being played like 13 years ago. That means information on this is really hard to come by. One of the best resources for this almost dead game is the frickin' Wikipedia page, and almost all the sources that page uses aren't even still being hosted online anymore. But I found something interesting about the history of this game. I think I figured it out, alright? So, hear me out. Okay, so, believe it or not, Neopets cards are kind of hard to get. I have no idea why. That's just the way it is. Now, of course, you could always find the full set of Neopets cards online and maybe print them out. Try playing with those or something, but hello, one of them made of paper or something? So guess what? I looked it up, and some amazing person made a Steam Workshop map of the Neopets TCG for Tabletop Simulator, and it's actually really good. It has all the cards from all the expansions, and it's set up in a way that's easy to use. You can get your friends on here, and you can actually play this game, this forgotten card game that no one knows about anymore. It's essentially preserved here in Tabletop Simulator, and that's actually super cool. Okay, you might be wondering, what are you talking about? How do you actually play this game? Is it actually any good when considering how other card games play? And I'm here to tell you that yes, it actually is. I know it might be a hot take, but hear me out on this one. First of all, the Neopets TCG was designed largely by Mike frickin' Elliott. Any idea who that might be? He was a huge part in developing and designing over 20 Magic the Gathering sets, and also worked on making games like Duel Masters and the Harry Potter trading card game. He worked for Wizards of the Coast, who made the Neopets TCG, eventually went to work on products like Hearthstone, and supposedly was the designer who envisioned Card Jitsu, the Club Penguin trading card game, although this one is kind of hard to find information on. And yes, you also heard that right. There's a TCG for Club frickin' Penguin, and you already know I'm going to make a video on that in the future. Elliott was later inducted into the Academy of Adventure Gaming Arts and Design Hall of Fame. So okay, he's got a stacked resume, and the Neopets TCG is on it. Was it really that good? Well, let me tell you about how you play it. So imagine for a second that Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Artifact collectively had a baby. You'd be about 80% of the way there as to what the Neopets card game was really about. Now, the marginally small amount of information that is available on this game is overwhelmingly negative for a reason: the starter set. Just look at this forum post from 2008. Hey, it's easy to learn and play, but wow, the game is bad, it's broken. A game should never last more than 6 turns. It's got a broken rule set and it's not worth playing. Looks like this forum poster didn't have a good time. Now, some of you may already be familiar with Billiam and his Neopets Still Exists video.
I actually had someone over to play this game just out of curiosity, and it's so heckin' simple. At least in the starter set. Looking at these rules, it seems to get a little more complex, but I really can't imagine how. Especially in the base set, there aren't a lot of cards that require strategy, and all your Neopets are pretty much evenly matched. So the whole game comes down to the dice roll. It's just rolling the dice until somebody gets 21 first. Looking at the rulebook, it appears as if the game gets a little more complex with the expansions, but right out of the box, it's incredibly simple, dull, and boring, except for Worf.
Billiam and the forum poster aren't necessarily wrong. The starter set really is that simple. It's just dice rolls and blocking off contests, essentially tic-tac-toe, with a bit of random number generation. But supposedly, from what I've researched, there was a tournament scene. There would have been min-maxers, competitive players, even deck brewers. There's still a staff tournament or something that is on the Neopets website. What even is this? I can't parse it at all. What was the point of this. Anyways, the game itself is relatively simple. Each player has 2 decks, a main deck and a Neopets stack. So you keep 10 basic Neopets cards in your stack, and you draw 4 cards from your main deck at the start of the game. Each turn, you can draw a Neopet from your Neopets stack and place one on a contest of your choice. If you know Magic the Gathering, Neopets uses similar terms, as creatures come into play tapped or with Summoning Sickness. After playing your Neopet with a max of 3 Neopets in play for each player, you can choose to play cards like equipment cards, location cards, something has happened cards, and turn your basic Neopets into experienced Neopets. You can also participate in contests, which are the key to winning the game. Each Neopet has 4 stats, and you use the corresponding stat for the contest you enter. During a contest, each player gets the opportunity to play an item card and roll a die. Add the total sum of each value together to determine the winner of the contest. The winner can then choose to bank a card, or draw a card. Banking a card is playing cards with gold value into your bank. Once your bank accumulates 21 or more gold in value, you win. There is a catch to winning a contest, however. If a player ever rolls a 6, they win instantly, which could be a huge blowout to either player. In my opinion, it was mechanics like this one that contributed somewhat to the downfall of the game. There are also hero and villain cards that create interesting strategies for certain decks. Villains allow you to essentially block contests off, preventing some decks from using their combos, and stopping the tic-tac-toe game plan that some players may have learned with by using the starter deck. Heroes, on the other hand, are ephemeral cards that last 1 turn. They come into play to defeat a villain, and if they fail, they get discarded, and that's it. And, oh yeah, one of the heroes of this game is God. Yep, there's a Neopet that is literally God. He made a world called Pataria or something, and eventually ended up looking like this. I don't even know, man. Now, the meta for this game would have been an interesting place had it survived into current day. Cards like Cat Cheek Shepherd enable decks that operate like Legacy Enchantress from Magic the Gathering and Miracle Rogue from Hearthstone. Lists from the old meta suggest that deck consistency was improved, essentially running tribal synergies, allowing more consistent evolutions into experienced Neopets early, and enabling synergistic item and location cards. All in all, the gameplay is actually really engaging. It uses lanes that force you to focus on different angles of attack and defense, like Artifact. It has card evolution and free mana costs, like Pokemon. And it has the tapping system from Magic the Gathering. But there is one missing piece of the puzzle: the mysterious constellation cards. The most similar these cards can be compared to is enchantments in Magic the Gathering, but I'll get into why these are controversial later. Finding a precise product history for the Neopets TCG is actually super difficult. By piecing together a few different sources, I can make an educated guess that the first products to be released were the 2-player starter kit, along with the base set, which introduced these Neopets. Battle for Meridel was our next expansion, which introduced theme decks and location cards. Location cards and new card types have an interesting history behind them. Supposedly, it was difficult for players to find rules for new card types on release. That means for card types like Constellations, the rules are actually up for debate. There is no official ruling for Constellation cards. So a large part of playing the game is intrinsically left up in the air. If you're someone who plays card games competitively, this is the worst possible scenario. If there is no authority on the rules, then in theory the players can argue forever about how cards work. You can see why Neopets tournaments didn't always work out that well. Theme decks as a product, on the other hand, seem to have been a one-time thing. I can't find any information out there that these decks might have existed in further expansions. As with all information in my video essays, if you know more or related information about the subject, please comment below. Okay, after Battle for Meridel, Wizards of the Coast hit us up with The Return of Sloth. Apparently this set was about space and stuff. It was supposed to be tied in with an event on the actual Neopets website, but the event apparently happened 4 years later. Yikes. This set introduced these Neopets to the game. After that expansion, we had Mystery Island. It's a tropical themed 100-card expansion that brought these Neopets. Then we had the formative Hannah and the Ice Caves. From what I've read, this expansion was actually kind of well received. Hannah was a popular character in Neopets, and a lengthy plot tied with the character was released alongside the set. It introduced the secret rarity for certain cards, and also introduced a new card type, Fates. Here are the Neopets that came with this expansion. After that, we had Curse of Maraqua. This was my personal favorite set when I was younger, and was set in the underwater city of Maraqua. These were the Neopets the set came with. Then we had Lost Desert. I don't have a lot to say about this one. It took place in a desert. Great. It introduced these Neopets to the game. But after Lost Desert, oh boy, here it is. We had the Darkest Fairy. Now this expansion was the real deal. It was a tie-in with one of Neopets' largest promotional events that even had its own PS2 game. Cards were directly related to the characters from the game and the website, and the problematic Constellation card type was released. I believe this was the set that also released the extremely coveted sketch card rarity, being as rare as 1 per 4 booster boxes. By the way, these sketch cards are valuable, like really valuable, so if you played this game in the past, it might be worth looking to see if you ever opened any. After that expansion, we had Travels in Neopia. This expansion set was really interesting and more akin to something like Magic the Gathering's Modern Masters, or every other Yu-Gi-Oh set ever. Essentially, it's full of reprints. All 200 cards seem to have been favorite reprints from previous sets. Information on this set is a little harder to come by, but it seems like this set was less well received and was not promoted as heavily as the others. And finally, the last expansion before the Neopets TCG died, the Haunted Woods. This set was set in some spooky forest or something, and prominently featured Victorian Gothic tropes like ghosts and werewolves. This set did not introduce new Neopets, and was the last set produced by Wizards of the Coast. Also, it was creepy. So, why doesn't the Neopets TCG get played anymore? Well, quite frankly, there were a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that stands out to a lot of players was how the game used dice. Mark Rosewater, the head designer of the most popular paper-based trading card game ever, Magic the Gathering, wrote a seminal article on the use of variance in card game gameplay and how the average player reacted to it. Even in situations where dice made sense from a designer's perspective, it was an unenjoyable part of the game. When discussing Star Wars, the trading card game, another game that failed, Rosewater writes, "Here's the kicker. When you dug deeper into the comments, they equated dice with lack of skill. But the game rolled huge amounts of dice. That greatly increased the consistency." What I mean by this is that if you rolled 1,000,000 dice, your chance of averaging 3.5 is much higher than if you rolled 10. Players, though, equated lots of dice rolling with the game being more random, even though that contradicts the actual math. My point in this section is that according to our market research, players consistently have rejected game elements that they feel are random. Now, in the context of the Neopets TCG, this game rolls significantly less dice. It is, however, for each player a 16% chance of winning a contest each time one happens, regardless of game advantage. In my opinion, this facilitated a fair game still. There are many ways to avoid unnecessary risks, and the chance of winning or losing a contest was still largely associated with your advantage or disadvantage. Not to mention the fact that losing a contest had literally no penalty. Should you have lost a contest, you lost no resources whatsoever. When you look at popular card games today like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Hearthstone, they all utilize varying degrees of variance. The differences with these games, however, is that the players themselves don't roll dice. The variance is hard-coded into the design of the game through mulligans, deck construction, and ability effects. There is still a tournament meta for each game, with consistent, powerful strategies. Overall, variance does not affect the total consistency of powerful strategies. In my opinion, the same would have been the case for the Neopets TCG. But because the game rolls so much dice, the experience feels uncompetitive, and that feeling may have been enough to deter a large potential player base. Now ultimately, most TCGs fail in the long run. Unless this one was phenomenal, I think Wizards may have always known this was going to be a failed project. Many respectable popular TCGs lose interest over time and eventually die. Some are even successful for over a decade before they become discontinued. But Neopets died too. Neopets had to be successful for the tie-in TCG to have popularity. With the overarching death of Neopets came a lack of interest in the TCG and a discontinuation. For the Neopets TCG to still be successful, Neopets would also have to be popular. But ultimately, it's a card game based off of Neopets. Its core audience grew disinterested in around 4 to 5 years. At the end of the day, Wizards of the Coast is still a business like any other TCG company. Based on volume of sales, brand popularity, and a general trend towards a disinterest in Neopets, the TCG became discontinued in 2006. Whether that was due to gameplay, the brand itself, or perhaps the core audience moving on to newer interests is up to debate. However, I think it's a shame. there is so little information still available about the game itself, despite it being fun, intuitive, and unique. Although it seemed to fail, hopefully this essay and my collection of research will preserve some information about the game itself. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please consider liking and subscribing. I love learning about unique and forgotten card games like the Neopets TCG. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever played this game, or if there's a card game that's still close to your heart.